So think about the last time you just, let your imagination run completely wild, or maybe tumbled down a totally random rabbit hole online.
Which, let's be honest, probably happens to all of us more often than we'd like to admit.
Oh, absolutely. But today we're talking about the ultimate rabbit hole. For, gosh, over 50 years now, pop culture has basically told us one very specific story about Alice's adventures in Wonderland.
Right, the whole 1960s psychedelic interpretation.
Exactly. Like everyone just assumes it's essentially this chronicle of a massive drug trip. But what if I told you the truth is actually much stranger and frankly a lot more useful for your daily life?
I mean, it sounds like an incredible stretch on the surface, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't think a kid's book holds a secret to adulthood.
We're talking about a book where a baby literally turns into a pig, and a grinning cat just vanishes into thin air, leaving only its teeth behind.
Which is still terrifying to think about, by the way.
It is. But when you strip away the cartoon adaptations and really examine the underlying architecture of what Lewis Carroll actually wrote, you find a manual, a survival guide for dealing with arbitrary rules, broken logic, and authority figures who have completely lost their minds.
Okay, let's unpack this because we are absolutely not doing just some standard book report today.
Right, we're going much deeper.
Way deeper. Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how a 19th century fantasy acts as a modern cognitive toolkit. And to do that, we've got some great sources on the table.
Some really contrasting perspectives, too.
Yeah, we're looking at direct excerpts from the audiobook of the original 1865 text. Plus, we're bouncing that off 3 totally distinct modern reviews. We've got a completely unfiltered review from a 16-year-old for The Guardian.
Which is fascinating all on its own.
Oh, it's great. We also have a heavy literary analysis by John Walters, and even this really interesting framework from a self-improvement site called The Invisible Mentor.
And that eclectic mix is entirely necessary to break through our preconceived notions about this story.
Because we think we know it, right?
Exactly. Carroll's world is so deeply ingrained in our cultural consciousness that we often forget how genuinely terrifying and disorienting the actual text is.
Terrifying is definitely the right word. Like, if you think about Alice's initial descent down the rabbit hole, it just sets the tone for everything. I was listening to the audiobook excerpt, and I had totally forgotten the sheer, unfiltered absurdity of that drop.
The fall is essentially an exercise in stripping away the reader's compass.
Right.
Alice chases this white rabbit down a steep well, but instead of just falling through darkness, she finds herself plummeting past, cupboards, bookshelves, maps, and pictures hung on pegs.
And as she's falling, presumably to the center of the earth, by the way, she casually grabs a jar off a passing shelf.
As one does.
Right. And it's labeled orange marmalade, but it's empty. And instead of just dropping it, she manages to safely stash it in another cupboard further down the well.
So she doesn't accidentally hit somebody on the head.
Wait, really? Like, she is plummeting into a literal abyss, and her main concern is the proper disposal of an empty jam jar.
It is entirely unhinged. Carroll is immediately establishing that the normal laws of physics and, basic human panic just do not apply here.
Yeah, she's way too calm.
And the frustration only mounts when she actually lands. She finds herself in this hall of locked doors. She sees a beautiful garden through a tiny 15-inch door, and she finds a golden key.
But she can't use it because she's too big.
Right.
So she drinks a potion, shrinks down to 10 inches, but then realizes she left the key sitting high up on a solid glass table that she now cannot reach.
It's brutal. So then she eats a cake to grow tall, grabs the key, but is now 9 feet tall, and can only manage to peer into the garden with one eye.
It's just an infuriating sequence. If I read this as a kid, maybe I'd find it amusing, but reading it now, it just feels like someone wrote down a literal fever dream.
It actively refuses to behave like a normal story.
It really does. I was looking at that Guardian review by the 16-year-old. She writes under the pen name PanCB, and she felt the exact same way.
PanCB's review provides a perfect window into how a modern reader processes this text today.
Yeah, she didn't hold back.
Not at all. She was refreshingly honest, calling the events completely random and disconnected. She complained that there were just way too many characters jumping in and out.
Which, she pointed out, really hindered the development of any cohesive plot, though she did admit she probably would have loved it when she was, between 8 and 14.
Which makes sense for that age group.
But reading her critique, I instantly thought about the experience of doom scrolling through a chaotic TikTok feed.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison.
Think about it. You get a 3-second clip of a cat,
Sure.
right? immediately followed by a cooking tutorial, and then someone crying in their car about their boss.
Complete cognitive whiplash.
Exactly. There is no narrative through line. So if you are a modern teenager looking for a linear plot with clear character arcs, Wonderland is going to feel deeply, deeply frustrating.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the randomness, Pansy points out, isn't a flaw in the writing.
You don't think so?
No, it is the entire point of the exercise. Carroll deliberately drops Alice into an environment where cause and effect are completely severed.
Okay.
He is forcing Alice, and by extension, you, the listener, to figure out how to exist without a compass. You can't rely on your past knowledge or your strict Victorian education.
You just have to adapt.
Exactly. You have to adapt to a reality that changes its fundamental rules minute by minute.
I get that, I really do. But, I mean, if the world seems completely random, the natural human instinct is to look for a hidden code, right?
We do crave patterns.
We crave an explanation for the weirdness. And that brings us directly to the elephant in the room. Or rather, the caterpillar on the mushroom.
Ah, yes, the psychedelic interpretation.
We have to talk about how pop culture decided this book was just a massive metaphor for hallucinogens.
You were referring to the white rabbit myth, which literary analyst John Walters dissects wonderfully in his review.
Yeah, he really tears into that.
He points out how the 1960s counterculture essentially hijacked Alice's narrative.
Like Grace Slick in that Jefferson Airplane song, right? White Rabbit.
Precisely. That song took the imagery of Wonderland and tacked these heavy psychedelic meanings onto the story.
Yeah, the phrase feed your head from the song forever associated Carroll's work with dropping acid or taking mind-altering substances.
It became the dominant cultural reading.
But I have to push back a little here, just looking at the actual text. Alice is literally snapping chunks off a magical mushroom to alter her physical size.
True.
And she encounters a giant blue caterpillar sitting on that same mushroom, arms folded, smoking a long hookah, who lazily demands to know, who are you?
It is an incredibly tempting parallel, I grant you that.
Right. Can we really blame the 60s for thinking this was a chemically induced trip?
It's understandable, but Walters calmly and methodically corrects the record on this. The author, Lewis Carroll, whose real name was Charles Dodson, by the way, was a deeply conservative, highly religious Oxford mathematician.
Basically the furthest thing from a hippie.
Exactly. He wrote this as pure entertainment for a real little girl named Alice Liddell. There is zero historical evidence that Carroll used any sort of psychedelics.
It's just a giant coincidence.
Not just a coincidence, but a complete misreading of the text. Walters points out a really brilliant detail regarding the dormouse.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
Well, if you ask anyone familiar with the 60s song, they'll confidently tell you the dormouse says, feed your head.
Right. It's the big climax of the song.
But in the actual book, the dormouse never once says that phrase.
Wait, really? Never? Then what does he actually do?
He just falls asleep. Constantly. He falls asleep in his teacup. He falls asleep in the middle of a sentence during a totally chaotic trial.
That's amazing.
Walters dryly notes that falling asleep, regardless of the sheer madness happening around you, is actually a much more medically accurate depiction of how people react to heavy narcotic use.
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
And kind of destroys the whole psychedelic mystique right there.
It really does.
So if he wasn't writing about a drug trip, what was the actual point of all these totally bizarre sequences?
The true trip in Wonderland, as Walters explains, is one of pure logic and language.
Logic. In Wonderland.
Yes. Carroll is using the narrative as a literal playground for mathematics and linguistics.
Okay, I need you to walk me through that. Because on the surface, a rabbit in a waistcoat complaining about the time feels like the exact opposite of logic. Where's the math in this book?
Let's look at the moment where Alice first shrinks and starts panicking that she might have lost her mind.
Right, she's trying to remember what she knows.
Exactly. To prove to herself that she still knows things, she tries to recite her multiplication tables.
Oh, I remember this.
She says, let me see, 4 times 5 is 12, and 4 times 6 is 13, and 4 times 7 is, oh dear, I shall never get to 20 at that rate.
Which just sounds like total nonsense to the reader. She's just getting the math horribly wrong.
It sounds like nonsense to us because we use a base 10 number system. But mathematicians have pointed out that Alice's math is perfectly logical if you change the base system. In a base 18 system, 4 times 5 is indeed 12.
Wait, really?
Yes. And in a base 21 system, 4 times 6 is 13.
Mind blown. That is crazy.
Carroll was a traditional mathematician who was highly skeptical of the new abstract fields of mathematics emerging in the 19th century, things like non-Euclidean geometry and abstract algebra.
So he was kind of trolling his colleagues.
Essentially, yes. He embedded these new concepts into the story to show how absurd they were if you tried to apply them to the real world. The entire book is a masterclass in taking a logical premise and following it to its absolute absurd extreme.
That completely reframes the book for me. It's not randomness at all. It's rigid logic applied to an insane premise.
Exactly.
And he does the same thing with the language, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. The wordplay is the real mind-altering substance in this story.
The scene with the mock turtle is a perfect example of this.
Oh, I love that scene.
The mock turtle is explaining the curriculum at his school at the bottom of the sea. And instead of reading and writing, they learn reeling and writhing.
Which is just so clever.
And it gets better. The branches of arithmetic aren't addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. They learn ambition, distraction, uglification, and derision.
It is brilliant satire. Carroll is poking fun at the rigid rote memorization of the Victorian education system.
Yeah, just parroting things back without understanding them.
Right. He takes the very things children were forced to blindly repeat and twists them to reveal how little sense they actually make to a child.
So we've established that this is a meticulously constructed mathematical and linguistic puzzle. But here is the million-dollar question.
Let's hear it.
How do you survive it? Like, if you are Alice, or if you are just a regular person navigating a modern world that actively refuses to make sense, how do you get through the day?
This is where we turn to the review from the Invisible Mentor.
The self-improvement perspective.
Exactly. This source takes a purely personal growth angle. The author argues that the core of Alice's journey is about the painful process of learning from our mistakes and adapting our communication.
Okay, I'm tracking.
They bring up a wonderful comparison to Portia Nelson's famous poem, Autobiography, in 5 short chapters.
Oh, I know that poem. It's like that one where a person walks down a street and falls into a deep plot hole on the sidewalk.
That's the one.
And they are helpless, and it takes them forever to get out. Then the next day, they walk down the same street, fall into the exact same pothole, and basically pretend they didn't see it.
Right.
It takes them days of falling into the exact same hole before they finally have the revelation that they can just, choose to walk down a different street.
Precisely. The Invisible Mentor uses this poem as a framework to understand Alice's behavior.
How so?
Well, in the first half of the book, Alice is constantly falling into social potholes because she absolutely refuses to walk down a different street. She simply refuses to adapt to her audience.
Oh my gosh, her lack of self-awareness is honestly agonizing to read sometimes.
It really is.
The scene in the pool of tears is a prime example. She shrinks down and ends up swimming in this massive pool of her own tears alongside a mouse and a bunch of exotic birds.
A very fragile social situation.
Highly fragile. And what does she do to strike up a conversation? She starts enthusiastically bragging about her cat, Dinah.
Right. She looks at a terrified mouse and says, "Dinah's our cat, and she's such a capital one for catching mice you can't think."
It's so incredibly clueless. And then, when the mouse starts swimming away in absolute terror, she tries to fix it by bringing up a neighbor's terrier that she says is super useful because it kills all the rats.
Just digging the hole deeper.
She literally chases every single creature away by bragging about predators that eat them.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Alice is failing at fundamental emotional intelligence here.
Yeah, zero reading of the room.
As the Invisible Mentor outlines, she is trapped entirely in her own upper-class Victorian worldview. She assumes that because a cat is a comforting pet to her, it must be universally beloved by everyone.
Including mice.
Right. She has to learn that her reality is not the only reality.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting to me. It's not just her social awareness that requires a shift, it's her literal perspective on problems.
That's a great point.
The Invisible Mentor highlights that Alice's fluctuating size isn't just a quirky plot device. It's actually a powerful cognitive tool.
How so? Walk me through that.
Think about it. Alice realizes that when the rules of the environment don't make sense, the only thing she actually has control over is her own scale relative to the problem.
I see.
If you have a massive challenge looming over you, and you can metaphorically look at it from the shoulders of a giant, the problem shrinks.
It becomes manageable.
Exactly. If you change your vantage point, the entire nature of the obstacle changes. Alice's physical transformations force her to stop demanding the world adapt to her, and instead, she adapts her scale to the world.
That is a phenomenal insight. It transforms a children's fairy tale into a highly practical strategy for real-world resilience.
But here's the thing. You can learn to navigate the potholes, right? And you can learn to dodge the flying frying pans by shifting your perspective. But
Eventually, you hit the top.
you have to face the people who are actually making these insane rules. And for Alice, that means dealing with the adults.
Ah, yes, the authority figures of Wonderland.
The adults in this book are an absolute nightmare. Like, think about the last time you walked into a new corporate job or tried to navigate a complex bureaucracy.
It can be daunting.
You are handed a flamingo, you are told it is a mallet, and everyone looks at you like you are an absolute idiot because you don't instantly know their unwritten rules.
That is exactly what Carroll is writing about.
The croquet game with the Queen of Hearts is the peak of systemic absurdity.
It is the ultimate toxic workplace.
Truly. The mallets are live flamingos that twist their necks around to look at you right when you try to hit the ball. The balls are live hedgehogs that just unroll and walk away.
And the hoops are soldiers.
Right, soldiers who are terrified of the queen and keep moving around the field. You literally cannot win because the rules are fluid and the equipment has its own agenda.
And, just like in a deeply dysfunctional organization, the authority figures in Wonderland are driven almost entirely by unchecked ego and arbitrary power.
The queen is the worst micromanager ever.
The Queen of Hearts is the ultimate bad boss. Her only management strategy, whether a courtier's late or a gardener plants a white rose instead of a red one, is to scream, "Off with their heads."
There is no logic. There is no justice.
There is only fear.
And the Duchess isn't any better. She sits in a kitchen filled with blinding, choking pepper. Her cook is actively throwing frying pans and dishes at her head.
Just absolute chaos.
And the Duchess just calmly nurses a baby and says if everybody minded their own business, the world would go round a deal faster.
Such a wild response.
She is entirely detached from the violence happening right next to her. It's like a middle manager ignoring a massive crisis because it's not in their direct purview.
Which is exactly why John Walters concludes in his review that Alice's ultimate triumph in this book isn't defeating a monster in combat.
Right, it's an internal victory.
Exactly. Her victory is maintaining her courtesy, her intelligence, her equanimity, and her courage in the face of these mad adults. She observes their chaos, but she refuses to let it break her internal logic.
And that reckoning all comes to a head in the courtroom. This is the climax of the book.
The trial of the Knave of Hearts.
Right, who is accused of stealing the Queen's tarts. And the entire judicial system is exposed as a total sham.
The jurors are literally writing down their own names on their slates because they are terrified they will forget them before the trial is over.
It's so absurd, and the king, who is acting as the judge, demands sentence first, verdict afterwards.
It is the ultimate subversion of logic and justice. You decide the punishment before you even establish the facts.
It's madness.
It is everything Carroll, the mathematician, despised about illogical thinking.
They read this unsigned, completely nonsensical poem that has absolutely nothing to do with the knave, and the king triumphantly declares it as ironclad proof of guilt.
But this is the moment Alice finally snaps.
Yes. During the trial, she has been slowly growing back to her full physical size, which mirrors her growing confidence.
She's taking her power back.
She looks at this terrifying queen, this ridiculous king, and this entirely rigged system, and she realizes something crucial.
She recognizes that their authority is entirely constructed.
Yes. She yells, "Who cares for you? You're nothing but a pack of cards."
It is a brilliant psychological breakthrough. The cards only have power if she agrees to play their game.
Once you see the matrix, you can't unsee it.
Exactly. When she calls out the absurdity of the social construct, they lose their dimension. They stop being terrifying authority figures and become flat, harmless pieces of paper fluttering in the air.
So what does this all mean? We started with a 16-year-old's frustration with the lack of TikTok-style narrative.
We busted the 1960s drug myths.
Explored base 18 mathematics, fell into social potholes, and survived a incredibly toxic corporate croquet match. If we synthesize all these sources, what do we actually have?
We have a cognitive toolkit for reality.
Yeah.
As Walters and the Invisible Mentor help us see, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is a masterclass in recognizing when the rules around you are broken. It teaches you that when you cannot change the absurdity of your environment, you must shift your own perspective, change your size, change your scale.
It is a survival manual for keeping your head when everyone else around you is screaming for yours.
Exactly. And to leave you with a final thought, we really should look at the very end of the audiobook excerpt.
Oh, the epilogue of sorts.
It's a quiet moment that is almost always cut from the movies. Alice wakes up on the riverbank, tells her older sister all about this wild dream, and then runs off to get her tea.
But her older sister stays behind.
She does. She closes her eyes and tries to hold on to the magic. She sits on the bank and listens to the rustling grass, the waving reeds, and the tinkling of sheep bells.
Just soaking it in.
She knows that in Alice's dream, those exact sounds were the white rabbit rushing by, the splashing mouse in the pool of tears, and the rattling teacups of the Mad Hatter.
Wow.
But the sister also knows that as soon as she opens her eyes, it will all instantly change back to the dull reality of adulthood. The magic will fade into the confused clamor of a busy farmyard.
It's a surprisingly melancholy ending when you think about it.
It is. But it leaves you, the listener, with a profound challenge. As you navigate your own highly structured, logical, and yet deeply absurd adult life, complete with impossible demands, unwritten rules, and metaphorical flamingos for mallets, what dull realities are you simply accepting?
That's a great question.
And more importantly, how might you transform them back into Wonderland? Simply by choosing to listen and look at the world with the imaginative, flexible heart of your childhood.
A powerful reminder to let yourself fall down the rabbit hole every once in a while. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Wonderland. We'll catch you next time.